I say first of all, I'd love to thank Jennifer Abrams for joining us all the way from the west coast of the US, where it is 5 a.m. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Delighted to be here. Do you want me to share my screen while you
Yeah,
talk?
I'm just going to introduce you and do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'll hand it over to you.
I will
Okay.
not share my screen yet.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we're very excited to have Jennifer with us today, sharing about her new book, Stretching Your Learning Edges, Growing Up at Work. And so, yes, in case you haven't done so already, please mute yourself. We will have a breakout set in this session. And so when we go into breakout rooms, I think a lot of you appreciate it when you then turn your video on and are able to interact. We'll have a Q&A if we hope to have some time at the end of the session for that. We'll see. But use the chat feature to interact for sure. And if you reply to everyone, then everyone will be able to see your comments. We'll be recording this session and post it onto the YouTube Women Ed channel, and we'll let you know a link in case you have a colleague you want to share it with, or someone you know was coming but then missed out. And do engage with us and use Women Ed DE, our Twitter handle, and also use the hashtag Women Ed as well. And also Jennifer has a Twitter handle. You can see at the end of this list here at Jennifer Abrams. So Jennifer Abrams is a globally renowned presenter, a communications consultant, a former high school teacher, a former new teacher coach. So someone who has had to have a lot of difficult conversations, I'm sure, with new teachers. and she's also published many books, Having Hard Conversations, The Multi-Generational Workplace, Hard Conversations Unpacked, Swimming in the Deep End, and the most recently hot off the presses, Stretching Your Learning Edges, Growing Up at Work. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and hand it over to you.
I can share my screen. I hope this is going to click in because I was just looking at it. There we go. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good evening. I really feel bad. You know how you come in the middle of somebody's conversation, you have no idea what has happened before that because I was sleeping. And so people may have said all these wonderful things, and I know they did. And I have no context for it, but I do know that we're in the middle of this conference today. And I love both of these pictures and the concept that we're really working with here, which is we choose to challenge. And this book chooses to challenge. Challenge ourselves, challenge what a school or an organization wants from the adults that are in it. And we, the females, I think, are pretty much on the front end of actually saying we are, as it says at the bottom of this slide, change makers. And we've got agency and we have a shared vision. And so what might we do to stretch ourselves to live out that vision and build our agency? I am so excited. This just showed up. So Angie's looking at it. She's in the acknowledgements. This showed up this week. And it is the new book called Stretching Your Learning Edges, Growing Up at Work. It is meant to be a bit cheeky in that way, not the idea of grow up and being diminishing, but that we should be maturing, we should be developing ourselves. And I think that's really the essence of what we're doing here. Good. So we're gonna stretch our boundaries. I know Elka I just wrote, we've got a session on setting boundaries. We're going to stretch our boundaries in this workshop. There will be a couple of breakout sessions, but it's an hour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place in the chat, I hope I'm going to be able to do this. Let's see if I can do it, a packet for you as I start my introduction, just so that you have that information, not just on the slides, but that you have a packet as well. because I know people like to have things. So be on the lookout that that's in the chat, and you'll be able to download that. So as was mentioned, it's 5 a.m. here, and I am in California. When I am working in New Zealand, people ask me for my mihi. They want to know where my river is, where my mountain is, and who my family is. So just a brief piece that I am in California. My feet have been on the floor here for over a year since I left Brazil, where I was working. And so my river is the Pacific Ocean here on this side of the United States. And the mountain that I go to is down in Mexico. It's Mount Cuchma. And I ground myself there. And I think building up, having an extreme self-care practice and being able to take care of yourself is important. So that's where my mountain is. But I'm originally from the middle of the US, and that leads us into this entire session. And I say this every time that I do a workshop. I always dedicate my workshops to my nephews, Evan and Joe. They are in Bloomington, Minnesota in the US. And I did dedicate the book to them this time. They thought that was super cool. And the one on the right is Joe. So Joe always says to me, Aunt Jen, you don't work. And I say, what do you mean, buddy? And he says, you don't work. You just talk to people about talking. And that's not work. And I want you to think about that. I want you to think about what his perception is about what work can look like. Most people, not in our human focused field, but many people consider work transactional. They sell a car, they move you through a grocery line, they deliver a DHL package. There are transactions to it. But I know that what we do is different. It's transformational. It's transformational. And so I always speak to this idea that we are talkers and we're listeners, and we can transform by our conversations and stretch ourselves to get better at them. So this is Harriet Lerner, and this is on page 3 of your packet. She says, our conversations invent us, and through our speech and our silence, we become smaller or larger selves. And through our speech and our silence, we diminish or enhance the other person, and we narrow or expand the possibilities between us. How we use our voice determines the quality of our relationships, who we are in the world, and what that world can be and might become. A lot is at stake here. So I love this choose to challenge. I choose to challenge you to make each conversation, at least in the next week, if not for the rest of your work, your life, to be one that is enhancing and not diminishing, expansive and not narrowing. That to me, I think, is really the challenge. Now, I know that you are coming from a variety of different schools. I know that my friend Judy's here from the other side of the US, so we're coming from different countries. And that every school that I've worked with has something in their teaching standards or their job description about professionalism, that baseline idea of how we should be in the school together. In the state of California, we have a standard around being a professional. It doesn't get a lot of airtime because we focus so much, and many, many times rightly so, on our role or our teaching. But as I just mentioned, we got to challenge ourselves and stretch ourselves in terms of how we talk to the other adults in the school. There's work that has been done. I was just talking to Andy Hargraves. He and Michael O'Connor did a book about collaborative professionalism, not being able to separate the idea of being a professional from being somebody who is really capable of collaborating. And that's what you're doing today. It's Saturday, ladies. You're here. you're collaborating, you're supporting each other. And there's research that says that that's essential. Schneider here in the US, and about 2 decades ago at this point, they've moved on to other things. And Tony is out here actually at Stanford. They talk about that idea of relational trust. You're building up your capacities and your relationships today, and no doubt every day, for making schools better. There's research that actually got done that says that if we are trusting, and trust to me isn't just a noun, trust is a verb. If we are trusting with each other, we can make more change in schools. That seemed to me like a really easy thing to know in my bones, that if I wanted to be at this meeting, I could learn, I could feel safe at this meeting, this collective just today. If I felt safe and interested in being at it, I could learn, and I could take my ideas back to my school. Relational trust can make or break something, right? And on page 5, it talks a lot about, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for me in terms of my behaviors? Okay. The idea of, how do I demonstrate that I am trustworthy, that I trust you? And on 5, it talks about the 4 factors. Do we demonstrate respect? Do we acknowledge one another's dignity? Do we interact courteously? Do we demonstrate that we believe in other people's competence? I'm going to give you an example of that. I have a dear friend, my friend Eric, who so sweetly demonstrated that he believed in my competence. I would tell him, I'm off to do this training, or I'm off to do this. And he would say, lucky them that they get to be with you. Right? That idea that he trusted and demonstrated that he thought I was going to be good at it. And then I felt better about it. Do we do that with each other? Do we basically say, oh, I really want to learn from you. I know you have so much to offer me. Do we care about each other personally and professionally? Do we demonstrate personal regard? And do we show each other that we know that people put the interest of students first? Do we acknowledge them? Do we know that they've got the right values? And do we share that acknowledgement with them? These 4 things are, to me, sort of, and this is really interesting. Because you might go, oh my gosh, I can barely do 2 of those on a daily basis. I'm exhausted. But I'm gonna challenge you to say that should be the baseline. That should be our baseline, that we are thinking that way. So I'm putting out there to you, where are your groups? Where are you in terms of living trust aloud? And I always like, are you on a dirt road with your team? Are you on a gravel road, a cobblestone road, a 2-laned paved road, or an interstate highway? And are you thinking about building up your ability to get to that relational trust in your team? Not just talking about the what you have to accomplish, but working on the hows. So that's a piece. On pages 6 to 8, I am going to just share with you that I put together a sort of a self-assessment. It's not exhaustive, but it's just an assessment of things that you could begin to question. You could challenge yourself. Am I doing these things? Am I conscious of these things? Where might I be trustworthy? Where do I have learning edges? And so that, to me, and this is what's going to be really, up the ante at 2:00 in the afternoon. This is to me what I give to new teachers. And I say, this is how we should grow ourselves. This is how we should anticipate that the expectations are going to be there for us in terms of trust. Okay. But there's more. That's really where my book comes in. All right. Now, there is that need for professionalism. Okay. There is. And I've got colleagues that are doing the work on that. Professionalism should be the foundation, right? My friend Jenny Donahue, who I was going to say she's Canadian. She just moved to New Orleans. What a fun place to move to. Party on. She does work based on that concept from John Hattie around collective efficacy. We, in terms of Hattie's research, really can see that if the team trusts and believes in each other's abilities, it has a greater chance of making the rise of student achievement and well-being happen, right? We just saw that with Schneider. Now we're seeing it again. And Jenny talks about that. She has books that speak to like, how does that happen? And how does the collective work together? Because it's a big deal, right? I know that there are 4 pieces to collective efficacy. Albert Bandura talked, and he's 95 years old. He was a professor of psychology at Stanford. He's still around. He always spoke to the fact that collective efficacy means individuals have to be efficacious. Then they can show up at the collective. Okay. Collective work, joint work, the what of what you do in your teams is incredibly important. The sharing of ideas, the putting things together, the curriculum mapping, all of that kind of stuff, that's super important. And it's the task that we've been given. What people don't talk about that I really want to put on the table is that each individual that shows up in that team needs to be stable, regulated, capable, confident, resilient, because they show up and contribute to that team. And that's where I think we need to actually stretch ourselves. What do we need to do to be the best individual in the team? Because, and I'm showing you a bunch of words here, but Bandura would say a strong sense of personal efficacy, not only to manage one's life circumstances, but actually to have a hand in affecting societal change, contribute substantially. It's not what people want to talk about. And that's what I'm going to challenge you to consider, though, that the individual adults, you, me, our development, our growth is really at play here. And so in this book, I assert, and it really is an assertion, that we need to grow up at school. Not the kids, but the adults. Our orientation to our development has got to shift. We have to take time to look at it. That's what you're doing today. Okay. Not everybody from every school in your country is here. We got a small but mighty cohort that's saying we want to develop, because we know that working together is essential, and our work is becoming more complex. We know that we can grow psychologically, cognitively, emotionally, and you're seeking out learnings in order to do that today. That's hugely important, because it's possible to grow. We talk about Carol Dweck's growth mindset all the time with the wonderful children that we work with. What about us? How are we really working that? So what can we do to develop ourselves? I think that we can come to things like this. And I am a attendee of many a learning experience, so I applaud you on this one. But I wonder about the school. Can the school not just support child development, but can they offer opportunities like this because we need to support adult development? It's not an indulgence to take time to support, to provide resources, time, funds to actually grow the adults. People mention to me a lot, we in the States right now, and I think this is actually very important, are going to be focusing in the fall on the learning loss. That's their wording of what happened during the school year. They're going to focus on technology needs. They're going to focus on trauma. But to me, I know that we need to focus on the well-being and development of the adults too. That's going to be a key piece. And I don't know how much focus is going to be on that. It's not an indulgence though, because if we don't develop ourselves to be better educators and bigger human beings, what, are we going to go back to the same? We have had a racial reckoning, systemic racism, climate change, a pandemic. We can't go back to same. So what do we need to do to develop ourselves, right? So on page 8 in your packet, and prior to that, all those other pages, I sort of set the stage of what I think in terms about what we should do in terms of stretching. I'd love to have Angeline, put us into, you have so many different ways I could name you, put people into groups. Which ideas from the workshop so far have your attention? And you've got the packet, okay? And it's in the chat. If you didn't collect it, it's there. It got there, and I have it at 5:06 a.m. At 6 minutes after the hour, it showed up. Or how does this work connect to the We Challenge theme of this conference? Oh, and there you go. And we've got beautifully put into the chat. Thank you. So let's take let's take 6 minutes. Let's just do 6 minutes. Jump people in, Ange, and we'll jump back out. What are you thinking? And so this is where you'd have to come. Perfect. So now people are bouncing back in. Lovely. Thank you for that 6 minutes. I had a lovely group that I was chatting with. Is there anybody who wants to, and you can do it in the chat, you can do it, you can share in the chat, you can share aloud. Let's just sort of hear what wonderings do you have from that? Anybody feel like they're an extrovert and they want to share a question or an aha? Or not?
I just liked it when, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Julia.
I loved it. I was with a few power women, and Catherine Thornton mentioned, I think she was repeating a phrase that you had mentioned, Jennifer. Human development shouldn't be, isn't an indulgence, right? And it shouldn't be a choice either. I think if you're in education, you know, the phrase, and it's the most commonly used phrase, it's not the way we've done it in the past or before, right. It shouldn't even be allowed. It shouldn't, you know, and if it is said, people should just call it to the table and address it, because it's just, if you're in education, it might have been okay 10 years ago, 20 years ago to fall upon tried and true strategies, but things are changing at such a pace right now, not even just instructionally and pedagogically, but also, you know, as a human, you know, just trying to deal with all of the emotions and the resilience. It's not a choice. Change is inevitable, and it should be celebrated, but it also shouldn't. It should just be an expectation.
Right. And I think that, and my colleague Zephyr Achi said that, so I always have to give him a little credit for that. It should be an expectation that if you're in this field of education, you will be and developing children, you will also develop yourself. It's an expectation. Yeah. And I don't know if that's so true. I mean, there are structural conditions that need to be in place, but also just the mindset that we need to always have. It's a very, it's just fascinating to me. Yeah, very fascinating.
One
One
of the
other. Yeah,
One
please.
of the things we spoke about in our group was the fact that we realized that we need to put an increased emphasis on social emotional development next year in light of everything that's happened during the pandemic. And our focus has really been on students, but I think in listening to you speak, I'm starting to wonder, are we really saying the same or giving the same emphasis on adult social and emotional development? And if we are to do that, how do you kind of walk that line of, we think that this is important, but we know some people aren't touchy-feely. Some people aren't really into, putting themselves out there. So how do you continue to have this growth mindset on social emotional development of adults in a way that's meaningful and doesn't kind of go into some big therapy session?
Yeah. And I think that that's a huge question. I remember giving an assignment to a group at a math science school, magnet school. And I said, so what are you intrigued by as we move forward? And a person raised her hand and goes, I'm not really intrigued by anything. And so she made me giggle because it was the wording went too therapeutic for her. You know what I mean? I'm not intrigued. So I said, as you look at the list on the agenda, what do you think will be useful for you today? And she went, oh, I can answer that. And I went, okay. So, but it was a metacognitive moment. It just needed to not be an emotional moment. What are you excited about? What do you think? So I think it is possible to do this. And I'm going to show you some stuff about the expectation and then things that aren't per se touchy-feely, but it's essential in terms of collaboration. And it's the work is, yeah, anyway, we'll go into it. Let me show you. I want to show you the rest of the packet. So you've got like all of this other stuff in the packet, but I know many of you aren't going to get it until later, but there's some stuff I promise that'll be coming to you from the book. We've got to move into that work. And the basis of this is my cognitive crush. I have a cognitive crush on this guy, Bob Keegan. He was a psych professor at Harvard University here in the US. And he wrote a book in the 80s. This is his book in the 80s. He's written since then. He's written in the 2000s and the 2014, I think it was his last book. But this book was in over our heads. Okay. And he was challenging us at that point to say, we can't live at the level we've been living. We got to stretch ourselves. We've got to stretch ourselves. And there are two women that have really taken his work, at three women actually, and gone on to really stretch, to say, what about stretching at your learning edges? One is Jennifer Garvey Berger. You got to change on the job. You can't just be in the job. You got to develop yourself. And Ellie Drago Severson. And I'm happy to send you information about both of them. But what they talk about, and I'm not getting into the slide because we don't have enough time, is that we got to grow. We got to develop ourselves. We can't just be kind of socialized into whatever it is. We got to grow up. We got to grow up. And that's going to help, I hope, the world and ourselves. And what does that mean to grow up? Well, I'm going to give you the 5 facets that I always think about. But to me, the social emotional development that you were just mentioning, Dawn, it's about developing so that we can handle tasks more effectively, that we're not swept by those experiences, that things, when they come to us, we're less reactive to it. I don't think of that as touchy-feely. I think of that as being more stable, is keeping your energy, being more thoughtful, living with more ease. And I know that social emotional development sounds, like you said, a very woo-woo, as we'd say in California, but it actually is sort of an essential quality to being more energized and less drained, more effective and productive in faster ways in meetings, because we've got this this sort of kind of baseline of regulation and stability. And I look at it as 5 different things. Okay. The first one is we have got to know our identity or identities. We need, I know people are always going to say, well, it feels like I don't want to study myself. I'm not here. I'm teaching physics or math or grade 3 or whatever. But to know yourself, your history, your biases, your values, your limitations, and your motivations, and how that in moments bumps up against or crashes into your colleague, your discussion with colleagues or with students, that is an important thing to know, that you're not just swept by stuff. You're just, it comes up. I didn't know that. No, knowing yourself really makes a difference. And then deciding, do you still want to have those identities? Or does this identity really match, or my beliefs and my values, does it really match the place that I'm at? Or should I find another position because that might be a better place for me? It's an interesting thing about identity. Suspend certainty. Second thing, can we be less of an advocate at times and more of an inquirer? Can we build our ability to remain open to different points of view? Can we admit that we are wrong? Can we ask, I love this, can we ask, what are we missing? What do you see? Tell me what's going on from where you sit. What is your thought about what the kids might interpret here? Just always seeking out so that you don't always think you have the right answer. Now, I've worked with new teachers, and the new teachers have said to me, suspend certainty. I have no certainty. I want more certainty. I feel terrible. I want to build up my strength, and I know what I'm saying. And I think that's true. Building up your confidence is wonderful, but also never forgetting that you have one point of view and just seeking out stuff and then being able to go, wow, I hadn't thought of that. And knowing that you're okay, even though you hadn't thought about that. But to seek out other perspectives is a huge thing. To take responsibility, not just for your work product, but for your language, how you interact with people. I know that if I'm not clear, for example, and people might complain, I don't understand what you're talking about. Could you have sought out clarification in a more focused and purposeful way? If you need help, could you share you're seeking that information in ways that I can hear you, as opposed to I don't understand. If you want to have a hard conversation with me, can you do it in a humane and growth producing way? If you need to apologize, do you have the skill set to do that? If you have a concern, can you express that before it becomes a complaint, before you build up and get kind of cranky? That to me is on your side of the net, these kinds of linguistic pieces. And you're doing it right now, taking responsibility for your own personal and professional development. I just know that I've worked in education now for over 30 years. Can't believe I'm saying that, 32 years. And how we build up our skill set to interact with each other is huge. Fourth one, almost done, then we're gonna go back into a final breakout room. Engage in reciprocity. This to me is what you're doing right now, but it's interesting to me. It's the idea of you recognize that it's your responsibility to work with others in humane ways where you are in partnership with them. You're a value add to them, they're a value add to you. It's part of the work in your school, part of your responsibilities to continue to grow your skill set to do it, to show up being generous and wanting to receive information too, and you live that out loud, okay? The reason that not only, I mean, I put it in because I think it's a skill set that we need to grow, but it's also not part, may I say, not part of people's qualifications or credential programs. So I want you to go back, think back to when you went to university to become a teacher. Did they ever do anything about adult to adult communication in your coursework? And yet the importance of working with parents, working with instructional assistants, working with the community, working with your supervisor, working in your team. As I always say, I have a credential in how to teach. I don't have a credential in how to talk effectively to other adults. And it has been such, and we're discovering even more with all the research how essential that is. And when you work with adults, you need to build your resiliency because sometimes we're not our best selves. So how can we build our resiliency? And I call it the emotional, have your, work on your own emotional and psychological hygiene so that you're healthy for yourself, but you're also healthy for the team. So that you don't come in and just all over the team. Build up your bandwidth in your stomach so that you can deal with the challenges. You've been doing that whether you chose to or not in the midst of this COVID year. You've been in a big workout with that. And we've got to feel our grief and our disappointment, but we've got to figure out what are the tools that we need so that we can show up as the professional that we want to be. So I look at that and I think about, what do I need to do to stretch at any of those edges? What do I need to do in terms of my professional growth for next year so that I can emphasize ones of these things? Or what does my team need to do so that we can come back better in the fall? Okay, so this will be our last breakout room. And given the time, I think I only want it to be a 6-minute thing. So not 8, 6 minutes. What are you wondering? What connections are you making? And I think I'll try to put just I'll put those in the chat, just, know your identities, because you might not have the packet with you. But go in for 6 minutes. What are your thoughts about this? And then we'll come on back and I'll show you the last couple slides. I want to share with you literally that, and I want to finish up with us discussing. There is a last page that's in the packet as well. I'm putting that out there for you guys, that shows the facets of each of the dimensions, of the facets. So that is the last page in the packet. So we're going into it, and I want to show 2 other things, and then we're going to get back to the thing. That the book itself is available as an ebook and a paperback book, and you can find it. But literally that's it, and we're gonna, what could be next? So I'd love to hear from you guys. What were the immediate thoughts? Because I can tell you in my group, it was like, I don't know about this in my school. I don't see people developing in my school. So I'm going to challenge you. Can you develop yourself? And how might we, school-based or not, do some more stuff about building up our ability, our stretching? So as we've got 5 minutes, let's discuss what could be next. What are your thoughts? What's your insight? And we've got somebody in the chat. Oh, please share where we can get the book again. And I'm going to put it in the chat. You go to miravia.com, or go to miravia.com and we'll go there, and you can get an ebook or a regular book, and it will come to you wherever, please.
And Alicia's got her hand up. So if you just want to unmute yourself.
Hello, Alicia.
Hi. I work at Frankfurt International School, but last year and kind of the year before, so like a year and a half, I was part of a PLC, leadership PLC.
Great.
I think there were 2 or 3 women and the rest were men. But one of the things, we had these conversations all the time about how do you put yourself forward and to get into more leadership responsibilities and roles. And one of the things we set as a goal every time is to say, okay, in the next year, you have to put yourself forward to lead something, a committee, lead something, and then move from that and do something else. But it's like that sort of slow but sure goal setting. Okay, I'm going to take on this, even though it's out of my comfort level maybe, but to kind of push that forward every single time. And I just thought that was a really good thing for all of us to kind of keep in mind, that sometimes we back away, but then maybe no, we step forward and we try and we take a risk and do it, and then move on from that.
Did the men also do that?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I was just checking, because I always wonder, women are like, I don't know. And men are like, I have no idea. Yes, of course I could do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they just go in and do it. So it's sort of like, you're right. Developing yourself is also just like, would a guy do this? The answer is yes. Okay, then I'm doing it. It's just cool. Yeah, that sounds cool. And yes, Frankfurt International, Mike Johnson, and all those guys.
Jennifer, I also liked what you had to say about, how you can approach all of this in your faculty and getting away from the idea that it's, this very touchy-feely therapeutic kind of thing. And I think all of those bullet points that you listed in a previous slide as to, what we're really talking about, how you can be your best self at work. I think, if you started faculty meetings at the beginning of the year looking at this and saying, we're really going to be taking a hard look at how we can support each other in these types of ways, who would not want to be able to say, yes, I can, I can be that person. Those skills sound amazing. Like, who wouldn't want to improve in that way? Which is kind of like we were saying, the adult version of the social emotional, in a way that's not going to perhaps cause some people to run fleeing and screaming.
Yes. And I was just putting in and I agree with you, in the chat, that teaming, Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School does books on teaming and psychological safety. And Adam Grant, who's at the University of Pennsylvania, writes books about Think Again, which is the suspend certainty piece. They're in business schools. They talk about this as being, if you do research with Google, which is primarily, it's a business. What does it take to get really good work done? And what does the team need to look like? There's not much, they're not talking about touchy-feely stuff. They're talking about, let's be productive, let's be effective, let's be energized, let's be useful to each other. And it ends up being social emotional, but it's really about getting stuff done as well.
And we've also got a comment in the chat from Anna, one of our regional leaders here in Berlin. She shared that for her, it's about developing herself and then also trying to reach out to those in her team and network to draw them into that journey where she can, in ways that they're comfortable with, to build that trust and reciprocity and support.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this hour whooshed by. Please take a screenshot of everything. The packet will get to you, which has all of this stuff on it. Please be in touch and let's stretch together. This is really new work for me. Like just got the book in my hands this week. And the idea of me writing a book, I always write a book that's a size too big. So I always say I'm a size 9. I'm in a size 8 shoe, and it's a size 9 book. And and to try to be in a space of, as my colleague says, undefended presence. Like, what do you think about it? Could this work? What aligns with you? And then not be upset, or, you know what I mean? Just sort of see how it lands. But it's what I hope that we can do, is to stretch. So thanks for letting me join on in. And, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your generosity of time and also commitment to helping us all grow and to stretch our learning edges by sharing your expertise. And I always learn from you so much. And I had to laugh when you said, when you work with your other adults, you need to build your resiliency, and that was something that resonated with me, and something that I'm going to take into, so that we can all go into this next steps with emotional and psychological hygiene, as you say. Another phrase I love from you. So thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you so much for your time. And for everyone who's here with us today, we're going to take a 15-minute break, or